Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for a discussion about brand safety in the era of conversational advertising. I'm Jenny Wolfram. I'm the CEO and founder of Brand Bastion. And with me today, I have Amin, who is the Global Director of Data-Driven Marketing and Media at Reckitt Benckiser. Reckitt Benckiser is a global consumer goods company with many fantastic brands such as Lysol, Claricil, Veet, and Mucinex. Thanks so much, Sam, for joining us today.
No, thank you for inviting me. I'm super excited to be around.
At Brand Bastion, our mission is to keep brands and social media users safe from offensive, discriminatory, and otherwise harmful content on social media. And today we're going to talk about the topic of brand safety and how brands should approach this in an era where anyone can comment on social media, on paid assets or organic assets around the clock globally. So for some context, Sam, could you start us off by telling us a bit about Reckitt Benckiser's advertising strategy when it comes to social media?
For sure. I think like most CPG companies, we didn't really have a kind of organic content strategy for social channels. We used it for paid advertising, similar to how we use TV, and usually used it to drive incremental reach to TV. What we realized then is that social, and especially the likes of Facebook and Instagram, can do so much more than that. And what we do is segment our audiences, unearth insights, leverage that in communications, and really drive a more segmentation, audience-first approach to these channels. And what you've seen is that the efficacy, not only in just the media metrics that are performing, but also the effectiveness in sales is also performing really well for these channels. So we're moving away from a very mass market approach to social media and moving into, we still want to hit loads of audiences, but we want to do it in a very segmented way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So really making full use of the kind of interactive nature of social.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can also get an understanding of if the sentiment of the campaign is landing with the audiences, so which you can't do on TV.
Yeah. I recently read an interesting survey that stated that over 60% of Americans, they think that brands should take an active stance against racism. We also saw during the past year that more and more users are at times even demanding that brands really speak out and enforce their values. Where do you think this change in consumer behavior is coming from?
It's a very good question. I think consumers are expecting a lot more from companies and brands, just beyond the functional benefits or experiences that their products or services deliver. And they believe that governments alone aren't going to be able to help. And there's a stat I saw that at least 45% of Americans trust brands more than they trust their own government. So I think brands have a prominent role to play in helping shift and change the societies that our consumers are in. I think people have found a voice as well. Before, when you're advertising on TV, it was the brands telling you that they're the best. Consumers now can air their dissatisfaction or satisfaction on social channels and gain a wide audience that will deliver that will hear that message that they're looking to deliver. So I think the brands really need to tread lightly and really make sure that they have a clear strategy on how they're going to use the social channels and not be opportunistic and not make sure that they are just box ticking and they're not doing things just for PR. Because I think consumers are very savvy these days and they'll be able to pick up on a lack of authenticity that brands are showing. So I think brands need to make sure that their intent is also represented in the content, and understanding your audiences is going to be key in how you communicate to them. Because today's cancel culture, it's very prominent, and when your intentions are good but the impact isn't, it can really spiral out of control and get really negative PRs. So brands are trying to find their voice. They're trying to do the right thing. But on social channels, it's very hard to please everyone.
Yeah, it sure is. When it comes to especially smaller brands or disruptors or brands that are trying to scale up their advertising efforts, do you have any advice specifically for them when it comes to really expressing their values on social media, or how they should go about figuring out perhaps even what their values are and what they want to express?
I think understanding your audience and make sure that your content plan is also linked to your activation plan, right? So not just produce content for content's sake, but demonstrate the good that you're doing outside just advertising, and link those two together, because that's when the authenticity happens. It's not just saying we believe in this and not doing anything about it. It's actually showing that your audience is that you're actually more than just talking, you're walking the walk. And making sure that you have a clear strategy in place and a purpose and the values, because you're not going to be able to keep everyone happy on social media, right? And when you try to keep everyone happy, by nature, you don't keep anyone happy. And people will have such different views. They'll see one piece of creative or one action, and there'll be a multitude of different views and opinions. So if you're kind of scared of getting negative comments, or if you're scared of getting a backlash, then maybe social channels aren't for you. But if you're clear to say that this is my intent and this is how I'm going to see it, and then yes, there will be people that might disagree, but it's okay, right? As long as I'm doing what I feel is true to the brand and my consumers. And I think that's the barometer they should be setting and benchmarking the activities against.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And also making sure to really monitor and track and know what's going on after you go about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of social channels. You can read it, you can see if the message is resonating, if it's sticking. And it's also really good to getting insights. So when you've done well, they'll tell you why you haven't done well. And then you can course correct. But it's having the systems in place to monitor that, and really taking the time out to listen to consumers real time, and then more importantly, actioning on it. Because there's nothing worse when the consumer takes time out to tell you how you can do better, and you just simply ignore it.
Yeah, absolutely. What does the term brand safety mean to you?
Brand safety is how we put controls in place to protect our brands and people against content which we won't tolerate and they won't tolerate. So I think many brands, and like us, we have an exclusion list, and we say these are the terms that and content and websites we want to be excluded from, and that's it. But I think brands should be doing more in this space.
What do you think brands should be doing more?
I think what I can tell you what we're doing as a reference, right? So there might be a lot more smarter people out there doing better stuff than me, but what we're doing is we're trying to have a tiering system of global brand safety standards, which regardless of what brand or what market you are, it's a no-go. Then what we do is look at it on a brand by brand basis. So our portfolio is very diverse. We have Durex, which is quite liberal in what it's willing to accept, versus a Nurofen, which is quite restricted, and Lysol and Dettol, et cetera, et cetera. So with a diverse set of brands and a global footprint, we then go corporate, global brand, market. And that way we give the markets and the brands flexibility, because each brand, each audience, each strategy is very different. And I think by having a one-size-fits-all approach, it's kind of restrictive, and brands feel that they can't take advantage of opportunities that arise. But having that first and foremost is going to be key in terms of how you activate your brand safety exclusion lists.
Yeah, the customization part is definitely something that we've also been exploring a lot at Brand Bastion, and it's definitely very important. Where do you think the line of kind of responsibility lies between social media platforms and brands themselves when it comes to specifically dealing with harmful comments across social? Or is there a clear line?
I think the easier thing, and a lot of companies are doing, is like trying to get Facebook and Google to solve their problems, right? And I think that it all starts with us. It's identifying what we are willing to accept as a brand and as an organization. Google and Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, Snap, they're not going to be able to do that for you because every brand is different. So understanding your purpose, understanding your values, do that, get that aligned at the top level. And everything from the CEO to the board, and that will help determine the actions of the company and then what you're willing to accept and what you're not. Then once you have that in place, you can then start having constructive conversations with the likes of Facebook and Google and Snap and TikTok and say, okay, these are the things we're willing to accept. These are the things you're not. Now, then what can you do to help mitigate the chances of my content appearing next to content that I will not accept or tolerate? But that's where a constructive dialogue is. And I think advertisers in the past have said it's a Facebook problem, it's a YouTube problem, it's a TikTok problem. And taking greater ownership of what's acceptable is their responsibility, not the platforms. We also need to make sure that there becomes, over time, stronger controls in feed, and making sure that we have the systems, both internally or partners like yourself, that can really help us moderate comments and ensure that our controls and our values are being respected when we advertise, and making sure that we categorize the comments and have an understanding of what type of sentiment our advertising is generating.
Yeah, so everything really seems to come back to knowing who you are as a brand, defining your principles, defining your values, and then setting out to take actions that actually align with that.
Absolutely. And knowing yourself and not trying to please everyone, because you won't be able to please everyone. And if you're strong enough to understand that I'm trying to do good, and make sure that your intention and impact are closely aligned, because when they're not, you can get bad PR and a consumer backlash. Yeah.
And so that ultimately brand safety comes back to that. I think this was a fantastic chat. Thanks so much, Sam, for all your advice. I'm sure all the advertisers out there are going to find it super useful. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.